Hello, my name's Rebecca Richardson, but most people call me Becky, and today we are going to go over 6 fun ways to plan your characters. If you're anything like me, you get a bit bored of doing the same ways of planning characters over and over again, like, all of the basic sheets you see with the quiz questions on that are like, what's your character's favourite colour? All that kind of thing. And it gets boring because you're doing the same thing over and over. And so over time, I've kind of found my own ways to plan characters that are a bit more interesting than just filling out sheets, and I thought I'd share them today. The first fun way is Sims. If you don't know what Sims is, it's a computer game that I think you can also get on Xbox and PlayStation, and it's basically a simulation of real life using little people that you create. I use Sims all the time to make virtual versions of my characters because I can't draw, so instead of drawing them, I make Sims of them, and then I can actually physically see them. On The Sims, you can also choose traits for your characters, which also massively helps with planning characters. Basically, you have to choose an aspiration as well as 3 character traits, and you can pick from quite a wide variety of them. And doing this allows me to think more about my characters as people and what they would want from life. So when it comes to the aspiration, I find myself having to think, well, what does my character really want to get out of life? And sometimes it helps me realise that actually they don't have much motivation, there isn't really anything outside of the main plot that they're working for, and this really helps me to work on those issues and realise what I want my characters to actually work towards in life. The trait system works the same. You have to choose 3 traits, which are basically personality points, and this has also made me realise that some of my characters don't actually have a very specific personality. I look at the different traits and you have things like neat, romantic, angry, unflirty, and it made me realise that I don't actually know the specific parts of my character's personalities, and this whole system just helps develop them just that little bit more, and also quite often helps me realise actual points I need to put into my plot that show what my character's motivations are or show part of their personality that maybe weren't there before, and just all around really helps develop them into feeling more realistic. And it's also super fun because it's a video game, so. The second fun way to plan characters is to make memes, which to some might sound a bit odd, but meme culture's kind of spread over time, and one large way memes are used at the moment is to apply them to fictional characters. So I see a lot of incorrect character quotes things, or alignment charts where people have put real characters into them to work out where they'd sit. And I find a really fun way to plan my characters is to take those alignment charts and those incorrect quotes and work out which of my characters would be in which box, or what line each of my characters would say and who they'd be speaking to. And again, it's just a fun little way to really define your character and work out who they are as a person, because suddenly you're thinking, well, do they fit into this certain box? Is this the kind of line they would say? And it just helps bring all those points together. And it's also, like I mentioned, fun because it's memes, and especially if you're kind of my generation, making memes is kind of a large part of our culture. And so it is kind of a different and exciting way to explore your characters and work out what they would actually do and what they would say and what their personality would fit into in an alignment chart. Just cute little things like that. There's such a wide variety of memes to use as well, outside of alignment charts and incorrect quotes. You could do this with basically any meme that's ever been invented, or just make up your own. It's so easy, and if that's the kind of thing that you like and you're kind of involved in that side of the internet, then it's something you should definitely try for character planning. The third way is fan fiction, and I know the idea of writing fan fiction about your own characters might sound a bit odd, but it's actually really fun. How I do it is I take very popular AUs, so the coffee shop AU for instance, or that kind of prisoner AU that's going around, those kind of things, and I put my characters in those situations and work out how they would be. I find this works because you get to actually see your characters interact outside of their storyline. So instead of my main character and her love interest being in, a battle, they're instead a barista and a customer at a coffee shop. And it's such a different scenario for them, but it helps you work on their personality, because even though they're in a completely different situation, they're still the same people. And so you have to then think about, if that were the actual situation they were in, if my main character was a barista, how would they interact? Would she be nice to the customers? Would she be a bit rude to them? How would she actually do her job? And it helps again develop the personality outside of the main plot, because sometimes I find within the plot you can focus too much on just the exact points of what's going on. So I know how my character would act in this specific situation, but taken out of that situation, I don't really know what she'd be like at all. And so doing these weird fanfiction AU things really helps with that. And also, it's really fun, and it's writing practice as well. So if you don't want to be working on your main project, if you're stuck on that, you can be writing about your character still, but in these cute fanfiction worlds, and you're still technically doing work and you're still developing your characters. The fourth fun way to plan characters is character interviews. And I know I mentioned these at the beginning as sort of like a boring point, but I'm not talking about those kind of character interviews. So the usual character interview you will see is the sort of where you get like sheets on Pinterest and things where it's like, when was your character born? What is their worst fear? What is their favourite colour? And they do get boring, and they are also quite generic information a lot of the time. You don't really need to know what your main character's favourite colour is unless it's important or it has something to do with another aspect of the personality or the backstory or something. So the kind of character interview I'm talking about are quite unique. How I do this is I get my sister, who's 11, to basically just write random questions and then I answer them as my characters. But because she's 11, they're like weird questions. Things like, if your character owned a castle, would it be made of cookies or chocolate? And it's like completely irrelevant to the storyline. It makes no sense to anything. My character's never going to have to make that decision. But it allows you to kind of work on this odd aspect of their personality. Because I do find myself thinking, well, if my main character owned a castle, would it be made of cookies or chocolate? Like, and she would make a decision, but I don't know what that decision would be. And it does allow you to see into these weird little aspects of their personality, because with questions like that, you're then thinking, well, does she prefer cookies or chocolate, or does she like any at all? When would she know this? Why would she know this? Does she eat cookies more? Does she eat chocolate more? Where does she then get these cookies or chocolate? And it opens up this huge section of this character that maybe you haven't worked on before, and you're thinking about little details that somehow expand into these massive parts of their personality. And it sounds so little, but it works so well. Questions my sisters asked me in the past are, if they owned a teddy bear, what would it be called? Or if they had a unicorn, how would they do its hair? Just weird little things that make you really think about your character, especially when you're given the same questions for lots of different characters you have. And then you're having to really think about their individual answers. And it's just a very cute and exciting and very different way to really get into your characters' minds. The fifth fun way to plan your characters is playlists. A lot of people do this, and it's one of my favourite ways to plan characters, and this is just making song playlists on Spotify or Deezer or YouTube or whatever you use to work out either the story or for a specific character. So all of my playlists are based on the actual story that I'm working on at the moment, but then within it I have songs that apply to different characters or different situations. There's also songs in there that I put in for, if it was turned into a movie, this would be in the background of this scene, or this would be on the soundtrack. And it's just another good way to make you listen to the lyrics and also listen to the atmosphere that's created and the sort of emotions that the song makes you feel, and apply them to your own characters and work out how you want them to feel and how you want them to think. And then you have it all laid out and you can go back to them. I find it works really well if I'm stuck on a scene, or if I'm not really motivated much to actually go back and write. I'll listen to my character playlist, and then it gets me back into the emotions I need to be feeling and back into the moment, and I can sit down and I can write a lot better. This also helps you sort of track how characters change. So one of my playlists that I started at the beginning of the trilogy I'm writing, all the songs at the beginning were quite bubbly and not entirely happy, but they were a more upbeat, whereas the further down the playlist you go, they're starting to get a little more dark, basically, as the story's progressed, and that allows me to actually look back at it and just see how far it's come and how far the characters have come. So if you're into music, I would definitely recommend doing that for your characters. The sixth and final fun way to plan your characters is Pinterest boards. Personally, I love Pinterest. I know that might make me sound like basic or whatever, but I think it's a brilliant way just to sort everything out for my characters in terms of aesthetic, but also how they look and their personality. So each of my characters have their own board, and it's all sort of filed within a bigger board for the series. And the sort of things I will add to that board are either colours that they like or aesthetics I think represent them, or maybe if they have a hobby, if one of them's into photography, there'll be pictures of cameras, or I'll include the sort of fashion they wear or people who I think look like them. And it allows me to sort of visually see them as a character, not just physically, but also everything else about their personality and who they are. Especially as someone, again, who doesn't draw, being able to see them physically through this helps me a lot. I can sort of pick a model who I think looks like one of my characters and then use them to visualize them. It is just another fun way to do it, especially if you already like Pinterest. It keeps everything nice and organized. And again, like Spotify, it allows you to see how the characters have developed over time. So at the beginning of my main character's board, we see kind of the usual things like pictures of her face and also a lot of quotes that I'd like to apply to her and more things related to her in the beginning of the book. But as we go further down and the series continues, things do start to get a little bit darker, and then eventually we reach the sort of aesthetic and the sort of personality I see her having in the later books with all of the wing imagery and eventually fire. And that helps me see how she's progressed throughout it, but also how I want her to come across to the people reading and how I want them to be able to visualise her through the books as a character and how she's changed over time. All of these 6 ways I've mentioned are just some of my ways of planning my characters. I'm sure there's lots of other ways to do it. If you have one of these ways, please leave them in a comment and I will definitely give it a go. I'm always looking for new fun ways to plan that are outside of the usual. And I chose these specifically because not only are they fun and interesting and a bit different, but they do genuinely help you get into a character's mind in a way that I usually wouldn't. My stories have progressed a lot because of me using some of these methods. During editing, this is usually something that I'd go back and do after I've done this extra development on my characters, and then I can add bits in to do with them, and it just massively helps me. So that's all from me today. Like I mentioned, if you have any other ways, please leave a comment. Thank you for watching. Bye!